Hello, I'm making this video about my Horizon Fitness Model 4.1E elliptical. This thing has been, for a couple years at least, problematic in that it doesn't seem to keep the resistance where you set it. It's got a magnetic resistance system right here. So the way that works, there's a cable that pulls this, and the farther that is away, the less resistance, and when it's low resistance, it's very close. So there's a motor assembly right there that mounts in there, and I'll show more about this when I get it all back together. Basically, I couldn't find any information on this model elliptical when I was having this issue. It's a longer stride machine, which I quite like. It was, it's probably what, 12, maybe 13 years old at this point, and now we're in 2025. I'd have to look up when I bought it, but you know, it doesn't have a ton of hours on it, so it's worth saving. The shroud is a little tricky to get off. You have to take out some screws along the bottom, and I can point that more out later. But the big thing is that you have to get the crank arm off before you can take the shroud off. So luckily I've done bike service in the past, so I own a, this is just a Taiwan crank puller. And if you look, basically the crank is sort of like a bicycle crank, but it's got a star shape, plus shape, with a slightly tapered shaft on there. And effectively what you do is you thread in this part here, which turns on the shaft. So you back this out first because that's got a pin in it. And you thread that into the crank arm, obviously while it's on the machine still. Thread that in, toe bottom's probably a few turns, at least nice. Get that in there, hold it tight. And then you use wrenches to, you might have to hold that and you have to turn this part with a wrench to drive the center hole there against the end of the crank pin, which is here. And that'll get it loose. And once it's loose, it'll pop off. And on this machine, you can just kind of wiggle it. And I got lucky that I took off the left side, which seems to be the ideal side to service. You don't have to even take the other side off. But if you wanted to, you could. And I plan to test this without the guard on it until I'm satisfied it all works before so I'll put the crank back on provisionally until I'm satisfied that it works. So getting into this motor assembly a little bit more, what I wanted to show was that it mounts in here. Hopefully I'm doing an okay job with this camera. This is kind of my first time doing this YouTube explanation thing. This is the original motor, and I marked it 2025, because that's what I was looking into. So I've already removed these two screws from here that hold it on the faceplate. I think I've got a reference picture. Actually, you can see the marks where it was tightened, if maybe you can see. So that goes in there, and I've already removed the wiring harness as well. I'm gonna zoom this in a little bit more so we can hopefully get a little more resolution on what we're dealing with here. And again, this goes in here. So the way this is stepper motor assembly, I'm sort of familiar with this with my line of work, electromechanical engineering, but I didn't get too deep into this, the schematics. It would be sort of neat if I could figure out where to power this thing myself, and I probably could if I spent enough time, but I'm pretty sure I found the solution. So the way I actually found the solution was that I ordered off of eBay, and I don't think I mentioned this yet, but this 4.1E, as much as research as I did, and I did even call Horizon, and they were kind of helpful in their helpline, and they suspected that it was in fact the motor, but they didn't have any more detail than that. I was a little leery of their help and support, what they said, but anyway. So, kind of jumping around here a little bit, but in my research, I found on eBay a motor assembly, but I knew it wasn't for the 4.1, but the picture of it, it looked very similar. And I was like, all right, well, I'm gonna order that. I got it for like $70, I believe. Made an offer, and I'm like, well, maybe I can scavenge parts over. But I get looking at it, and I knew roughly how it operated. It's got the optical eye and a wheel that works with the servo assembly. And, but as soon as I'm looking at it, I'm like, oh, I didn't realize, looking at it, that the mechanism that pulls the cable, I knew it was cam operated, you know, on the shaft. It's got a motor worm gear. That's how this thing kind of works. But I didn't realize that there was a micro switch on here. So now I've removed this, and I'll show more detail of this when I get it back together. But there's a couple of nuts that space that up in the right place. And I took my meter and I confirmed that the way this is wired, I've already cut some string tubing off of there because I've been servicing this. I've got a new switch, which is the crux of this whole thing. That basically a new, off of Amazon, this is an Omron Electro micro switch. Maybe I can find the link on Amazon, possibly put it in there, but it's pretty easy to find. There's a lot of micro switches and they're similar idea. But it's got a normally closed pin, and a normally open pin. And on the old one, I could see quite quickly, actually, I think it should be labeled on this one as well. But it mounts in this orientation with the little pin there on the two holes and the bolts, which I'll show in detail a little bit more later after I get the new one soldered on. So I still have the old one soldered on. That the normally closed path, which is the outer pin, you can choose the far one to either the normally closed or the normally open in the center. The normally open actually meters okay when I push the button. The normally closed one never changes state. Let me just demonstrate that really quick here. I've got my meter on the ohm position. I'll try to get this where I can see everything. I'll try to be quick about this, demonstrate this. I've got this wire, I've got my test lead shut up. So going from here to that pin, I'm gonna confirm if you can see that. Yeah, we're open, it says OL, open. I should probably set this up. Open, right there. Open, 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 open. And when I do the switch, no state change. But if I put it on the center pin to the outer pin, it's supposed to be open. Press it. I had this working before. Oh, that's why my probe came off the other end of this. Apologize, technical difficulties here. Okay, back to the action. Let me go back to here, because this should be open, open. Okay, so it is, let's see if I can say this right. It should be normally closed in that position, which would be 0 ohms. And okay, it's mega ohms resistance, which is effectively, I mean, as far as the machine's concerned, it's not closed. It's just got a real high impedance at 7 mega ohms. And when I activate the switch, this pretty much stays the same. I think actually there I saw it partially work, so it may be intermittent, but bottom line, it's not really working. When I put it to the middle pin to the outer pin, open, close it, and say open, normally, and this is the normally open mode, which the machine doesn't use. This works, but so for whatever reason, the normally closed side of this switch is not working. And I've already confirmed that the new replacement one does, wherever I set that down. Anyway, I think you get the idea. I will go to the workbench here shortly and attempt to show a bit of the, okay, you know what, I've got it right here actually. So I will go to this pin. And again, in case you didn't figure this out, I've just got the other end of this little test lead clipped to my ground. It just came off again, so that. Because I was too lazy to search for my alligator plugs for this meter. So now, normally open, holding it on, normally closed is correct. It is in fact reading 0.5 ohms, which is basically a short. Push the switch in and it goes open. So that's that's the behavior that we want, so that when this is mounted, the claw of this cam will hit that switch. So I'm pretty excited because I haven't actually seen this work yet, but I'm pretty sure when I swap that switch out, we're all gonna be happy-go-lucky. But what I thought I would do is take my little short cable And maybe I can demonstrate how this thing was failing. So I'm gonna go ahead and hook this up provisionally. Yes, I do kind of like that word, sorry. Maybe overuse it. I'll hook this back up. Obviously it's not mounted. And goes in there. Hopefully you can see, if you can see. I'm just gonna be a little precarious here. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and power this thing on and we should see that turn. Okay, it may not turn. Okay, so the way that's gonna be mounted, that's fully that way, which is out, which would be pulling this to the least resistance. So I don't think it's gonna back the pin around until I command it to go to a certain resistance setting. So I'm gonna go up to the controls a second here. Maybe kind of tricky to do. And I'm just gonna select manual, select, and we'll put it in a higher resistance setting. And what I'm hoping to see happen is for it to command, and it's not doing it. I don't know why. Because again, it's normally closed right now. I'm assuming you can see this, maybe probably not behind my arm. So either I don't have this plugged in right, or maybe somehow it's not happy that I don't have this actually mounted in the assembly, or something else is broken. I hope that's not the case. But I just confirmed that I hit enter in the touch panel. Oh, no, I had to hit start button, that was the issue. So once I hit start button, now we see that motor going around. And again, this is as it was problematic. Effectively, that's on there, normally closed switch contact, or what it wants to think is normally closed switch contact, but it's not actually doing it. So it is just spinning around, kind of randomly, which behaved to us as a random, like it didn't know where it wanted to be. So I'm rather confident that if I now, and I don't know if you can see me doing this, if I now use my little alligator test lead to clip on there and short that, because again, it should be closed. So I've just made contact with that. I'm having a hard time getting it on there. Well, that's shorting it now, but it's not changing state. So this is, I didn't know what was going to happen with this. And again, it is possible that my, oh, there we go, it stopped. So whether it thought to the sequencing or what, I'm not sure. Let's try to command, oopsie, try to command another, that's the precarious thing about that. Try to command another resistance level. If we can, stand up to do it. Let's command a lower resistance. Start. Did it move? I think it moved. Let's try to command a -12. Yep. Okay, so it thinks it found home, but home is probably not where it should be. So that's about as much troubleshooting as I'm going to do. I'm still rather confident that when I get this thing switch mounted in there to where it picks up that probe at that point and it's actually sequencing right, hopefully the logic will be right and it will work good. So I'll resume this when I get back to the workbench. Okay, I'm at the workbench here now, and I want to correct myself on one thing. I think I said the 4.1 Horizon elliptical was like 12 years old. It's much older than that. It's probably 17, 18 years old, if I'm gonna guess. Anyway, so now we have this thing here, and the cable sticking out. I'm trying to decide the best approach to this. I should probably take the time to figure out how to power this thing manually, but I'm not even sure what voltage this thing runs at. I could do some research, but I'm just gonna put it together and see how it works. And because right now the cam is not from where I left it, taking it off, it's not where the switch is going to engage it. I think what I'm going to do is try to get this mounted back in here in a manner that just is biased in a little bit with the play of the screws. And one thing I wanted to mention too was that the new one, or excuse me, the replacement one that I thought might work is a different design. This switch has a pivoting leaf on it, which I kind of like that idea because it seems like it'd be less wear. You know, the wear point would be on the metal to metal, not on the actual button of the switch. But at any rate, I'm just going to go with how it was. I'll maybe not bore you with my poor soldering techniques. I don't even have any flux on hand to try to get this off. So I may end up just stripping the wires. I don't know if you can see it in my fingers, but this isn't a soldering video. I'm just gonna see what it takes to get this thing apart. Oh good, it came off just like that. Nice. So this shouldn't be too difficult to... Good, that's off. And I'm going to try to put it on the same orientation. I guess I could mount the thing first and then solder it. Let me take a closer look here, see what I got going on. Probably be nice if the wire went through the hole to solder it, but didn't feel like that's how it was attached. So yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and mount this thing so that I have it held, since I don't have a third hand style vise handy. And there's just these long screws, Saga head cap screws. They're a little rusty. I thought about looking for some different ones, and they have the wrong size nuts from a larger thread. I'm gonna guess these are odd 80s, and I'm gonna guess these are 440 nuts, but that doesn't matter. So they're just using those as washers. Kind of a poor man's washer. Can't say I haven't done that before, because I have. I'm just gonna mount this thing, get it where I can screw these in. Difficult to do this. I appreciate YouTubers that take the time to get the focus and everything while they're doing this, and I have cameras for photography and stuff that I do a lot of photography, but I'm just using my phone. And once you know, that pin is blocking against the cam. And get that over here. This probably isn't even worth recording. I'm boring everybody trying to watch it. Alright, that's there. Yeah, the problem is the other spacer fell out. So I don't know how I'm going to be able to... I guess I do know how I can do it, but I'm trying to do it on the camera, and that's making this very difficult. So we're just going to push it in like this. And there she goes. Alright, we're going to stitch this together after I've got that back together. With a little bit of attention, I was able to get this other soldered on there. And the way I ended up getting that mounted was just kind of vertically with the washers / nuts in there together, and was able to get both bolts started and snugged up good with a little Allen key. I also at one point had this Allen key loose in the shaft, thinking I could take that apart, but I made sure to tighten it back down good. And of course did the soldering with the wire off, stuffed it through the hole, this little thing, and that's not a very good soldering job, sorry. Whoa, what am I doing here? The camera. Nothing to be proud about whatsoever, but functional. There was shrink tubing that I cut off that was on this wire over the solder joints of the pins, but with all that, a lot of space there, I see no reason to have that on there, maybe for strain relief, but there, it just goes up. So, and then this just plugs into the board. And yay! So yeah, I'm gonna go mount this in the
back in the machine, and fingers crossed, a little pray to my Savior, and perhaps it'll function as normal now. So we'll go document that process.
So the way this thing works is the little pin thing clips into the resistance there. Might take I think what I can do is just thread it in, mount the thing, and then pull it. And pretty sure I can just pull it out and clip it in after the fact. I don't know where I'm focusing there. Okay, so I cut some zip ties too when I took this thing apart. I don't remember exactly where they are. I might go back later and look at some pictures that I took of it before I took it all apart, but I'm gonna say I can go ahead and, this is, by the way, there's a sensor here. I think that goes up to it's on the flywheel. That goes up to the speed. There's a magnet on the flywheel and then a prox sensor, whatever that is. It picks up the magnet, just FYI. So I'm gonna plug this main connector back into the board while it's easy to manipulate right there. And thread the cable through there where it's going to end up to be hooked up. And get my screws started in this assembly. Yeah, I didn't bring my driver in with me, but there's no reason not to use a regular old screwdriver. It's always the last one that I find in the bag, of course. It shouldn't take long. I'm just going to go by that witness mark for now, and once I confirm this thing all works, I may double check this cable slack and or the picture that I had from beforehand, but I'm just going to line up that screw to the witness mark on the slot there and tighten it in that same spot. Tighten there. Tighten there. Get that. Now, this should simply be a matter of pulling the magnet assembly out, which isn't too hard. And goes through there. I know you probably can't see any of this. It's just do it. There, now it's seated in there. Yeah, so there's just a head on that wire piece. Not very exciting, I know. There's just a clip. The cable had a headed piece on it, which is in there. I think you can figure that part out. And then the clip just holds it in place. So, should be ready for the possibly moment of truth. This thing's a little tricky to operate with half of the crank on. Oh, I left this thing on, so I'm gonna power it off. And back on from before. And the motor is spinning. What are we doing here, people? Okay. Back down. So I hope that it's finding its home position now. It's pulling out. Okay, so I think that it thinks that that is the lowest resistance setting, which is probably true for just turning it on. So I'm gonna hit start. And this goes 1 through 16, I'm gonna go to 8. And it moved. This is making sense so far. It's close. That's pretty close. Let's go 12. Even closer. 16. Which would be the closest. I'm not convinced it's totally behaving right, but it's in the right direction of things. Back to 1, which is the lowest resistance, and it's pulling away. So I am pretty impressed that this thing may not be perfect, but between cable stretch and possibly not getting it mounted back in the same spot, I'm gonna go back and look at my reference pictures, but I think we got her. I think it's just a matter of this adjustment, which sliding this assembly back towards the front of the machine should pull that out to the, I think the way I'm gonna do this now actually is to set it on the lowest setting, back to 1. I've always wondered if it's a matter of this thing wanting to see that it's moving before it's convinced that it actually should be doing your commands. It might need to see motion. So I'm going to put 9. And it's hard to move. Back to 3. Off the track. So there. And 16. I'm going to go to the hardest setting now. So in theory then the hardest setting should be where, and there's a little slack in that, but not much. I'm thinking we want to slide this thing over to the right. Get another screwdriver to kind of pry that with. That's obviously there. I don't know, with all the slack and on the hardest setting, which should be right there at 16, I'm just gonna bias the slack out of that a little bit. Let's go with that. Tighten the bolts there. Not the spring. There. There. And I'll put a note in the comments about the final demonstration in case people have already lost me or didn't want to see all this troubleshooting and fine-tuning portion. So we are up here on 1.1. We're up here on high maximum. Go back to 1. Pulling away. And that seems believable. I'm sure that's really low resistance right there. It actually does have quite a bit more play at that point, but I kind of doubt in that range that it would be noticeable. So I'm gonna put the crank back on. I'll show you how that works in case you're curious. And again, I'm gonna test this thing without the crank, even though I think we've got it at this point. sandy check that is tight. Oh, yeah, I'm gonna check it with the guard, and before I put the guard on, I'm gonna get a zip tie and tie this cables back in. But I'm not gonna do that right now because I don't think they're interfering or rubbing anything. So the arm on the other side is all the way down. Arm on this side is here, and you do have to kind of stretch this around a little bit to get this ready. And I am going to push this cable back because it looks like the arm can come around and hit that. Yeah, it's really close. It's really close there, so pause this. All right, I'm back. Yeah, so I got that mounted back on there. I just got this kind of tucked behind there, the wire. I'm gonna tie wrap that later. There's a bevel, it's a flange nut. I already put it back on. There's a flange nut in there and a beveled washer, or Belleville washer, however you want to say it. It's conical. And I can't 100% remember which way it was. I think the large OD of the bevel was contacting the flange of the nut. That's the way I have it on there now. It may not matter, but before I'm all done, I may take the other nut off the other side and confirm how it is to make it the same. And yeah, what I was just about to do was I went and grabbed my impact and the nut that goes on there. Apparently that's 14 millimeter side, and my impact has a adapter run the machine so I can get to the access to this. I'll just get this I got it snugged up pretty good. I'm not gonna, it's provisional. I'm gonna take it off to get the guard on later. So let's give this thing an actual test. Crocs are not gonna be the way to ride this thing, but yeah, so we are in 1. We'll go to 8. You hear it. And then it's got definitely resistance. 12. Yeah. And all the way. So like I say, I didn't actually look at the cam too closely, but apparently the micro switch is hitting good, and yeah, that's the most resistance. So I actually want to look at it in this state. So I'm going to shut it off just like this. And call this a success. I will probably give one more wrap-up video when I'm putting the screws on, but it's late tonight, so I'm going to leave it like this. Now that I'm satisfied it works. Thank you, Jesus, amen. Just about wraps it up here. I got it all back together. I just want to mention a couple of things. I talked about the bevel. Actually, it looks like when I took the other side off, the cone, small end of the cone is out. So the large diameter should contact against the crank, and then the flange nut goes to the small side. So I got that. I did look up online. Looks like most cranks should be about 30 Newton meters as far as how much to tighten them. I just used my impacts and just kind of did it by feel. I think that'll be fine. But if you have a torque wrench, probably best to torque those nuts down to that. And I did have trouble with the screws. Actually, I think I lost one. Getting them back in, there's little tie plates in a couple of spots. I'm pretty psyched that that $6 switch fixed the job. If anybody made it this far and actually had a machine that's this model or similar and my information helped, I'd really appreciate a comment to know that my video efforts were appreciated. So just let me know in a comment. That'd be great. Hope this helped people fix their Horizon elliptical 4.1E or similar. Have a good night.